Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great pleasure to be here. And although I didn't go to UTS, I did walk past it a lot of times over 50 or 60 years. It's really wonderful to now being a resident of Hong Kong to see many graduates of that fine institution. And it's great to get the opportunity to talk to you tonight, and particularly knowing the exciting things that are happening at UTS that you might be aware of. To talk to you a little bit about what's happening here in Hong Kong, a project that I know has been around for too long, first announced in Chung Chi-wa's speech on after the handover in 1998. And for those that aren't intimately associated with the project, as you can see, we have the world's most valuable piece of real estate, 40 hectares in West Kowloon, a reclaimed site with some of Hong Kong's most expensive real estate sitting behind it. And in the middle of the site, you'll see that intense level of building next to the tall buildings is the new XRL railway, the fast rail from Shenzhen, Guangzhou to Hong Kong, which will be completed hopefully by 2015, because part of it is 5 levels below ground, below our site, and for us to be able to progress part of our site, we have to make sure that the railway is there. But it provides us with some extraordinary opportunities. What we're proposing to do on the 40 hectares is a really interesting mix, I think, of cultural buildings to address some of the inadequacies of the facilities available in Hong Kong for their arts organisations and for their artists. A range of creative learning activities within those buildings and within the other buildings on the site. Some extraordinary leisure, residential and commercial opportunities that will sit within it to activate the site and make it work. 23 hectares of the site will be public open space, predominantly towards the left-hand side of the space, very much all surrounded by water, with big opportunities of both interaction and engagement with the water. Luckily, and probably why I found this project irresistible, is that you, the people of Hong Kong, gave me 21.6 billion Hong Kong dollars and put it in my bank account, well, not mine, but West Kowloon's, to be able to get this project off the ground. And that was an extraordinary, generous gesture by the government of Hong Kong to want to address what we were wanting to do with the project. We've gone through extensive periods of public engagement, particularly over the last 18 months, and we're now at the point where things are starting to get a little more interesting, and I'll say a bit about that as we move on. For those that don't know, I first came to Hong Kong in 1964 on a P&O ship on my way to England, and somewhere along that front where the piers are, the boat stopped, and we stayed here for 3 or 4 days, and that was my first exposure. And I clearly recognised that the WKCD site, the orange site, it didn't exist. It was water, and so we now occupy that important piece of Hong Kong real estate that when I first came here I didn't even know about. And how could I believe 50 years later I would be back here to now take responsibility for this project. We went through a process which many of you will be aware of competition for conceptual plans for the site, and that process was completed in early 2011. Norman Foster and his team were chosen as the master planners. The 3 finalists were OMA, Rocco Lim and Norman Foster, and that decision was made, and that now provides the backbone to the project that we're now taking forward. What we're trying to do is almost unprecedented, I think, in terms of the scale of what this project is about. 17 theatres ranging from 150 to 18,000, an exhibition centre, a 60,000 square metre museum, bigger than MoMA in New York, and every configuration of theatre space that you could possibly imagine. And it's an extraordinary, courageous and epic project which we hope we can pull off over the course of the next 10 to 12 years. The master plan situates us in terms of the space with the park and the major performance venue and exhibition centre on the left-hand side, but the concentration of most of the artistic spaces, including the museum, which is the one closest to the park. The other theatres are all situated within the space leading up to the corner of Canton Road and Austin Road, and clearly integrated into the rest of the space. And there's a fantastic opportunity for us to be able to try some of the things that I've played around with in places like the South Bank Centre and at the Opera House, in trying to look at much better interaction between art spaces and commercial spaces and spaces that people want to spend their time in. We're not trying to create another shopping centre, clearly, but we do want it to be a very vivid, dynamic and animated space. And clearly one of the most important parts of what we're trying to do is to create a piece of public space in Hong Kong that is not like necessarily other pieces of public space. That the 18th cultural venue will be the 23 hectares of park, which will have specific artistic facilities within it. It'll have a lot of major art pieces within it, but it will also be the area that we hope will be, whether you're interested in going to performances, whether you're interested in eating and drinking, we do think it's really important that the people of Hong Kong have a public space, unlike some of the other rather controlled spaces that exist here at the moment. And one of the important things is that we've started off saying you will be able to lie on the grass, you will be able to ride a bike, you will be able to fish, you will be able to put your feet in the water, those sorts of things which we think will redefine the concept of public space in Hong Kong. In terms of Foster's master plan, it looks at the space on the site as trying to integrate the cultural facilities into the other things that are happening, and with space at a premium. But we have been given some significant advantages. We have a 1.81 plot ratio, and that makes it a relatively different space to the rest of the space in Hong Kong. We have height limitations of 50, 70 and 100 metres across the whole of the site, which will significantly distinguish it from the buildings behind it, of which the highest is 487 metres and most of the others are well north of 280 metres. One of the major factors within Foster's plan was that there would be no car traffic on the site. All traffic and servicing of the buildings, car parking and everything else will be underground. Now clearly there's some big challenges in that, in the railway that's being built under our site and adjacent to our site is 5 levels below us, and so poses some really interesting challenges on the engineering and construction front. We're looking at a lot of public space that you can engage in different ways, lots of opportunities to eat, drink, shop, but we're not trying to create competitions to Harbour City or to Landmark or to Pacific Place. We really want it to have a character of its own. Some specific things that are not well addressed in Hong Kong. You will see over the course of the coming weeks some big contemporary music festivals happening on the West Kowloon site. You have the Renaissance Foundation Festival this weekend. You have then Clock and Flap happening the following weekend, and then you have our free space festival on the site in the second week of December. And we really want to start to encourage the whole idea of outdoor performance. We don't really understand why the idea of using the outdoors, if you can do it in London, then you've got to be able to do it in Hong Kong, is my view. So we're looking at some specific contemporary music spaces, spaces for young people within the park, and then we're looking at some big open areas that can be used for public performance. Importantly, in terms of the location, is how it connects to the rest of Hong Kong. And we're in a reasonably fortunate situation in terms of the site. We're looking at substantial water connections to the site. We have already the Austin Road and the Kowloon MTR stations. We'll have the 100 to 200,000 people arriving daily from Shenzhen, Guangzhou and the rest of China. And then we have the existing connections via Canton Road, the Star Ferry, across to Temple Street, Jordan, Kowloon Park, all of those places, which we think provide us with an extraordinary opportunity to be able to connect our site to everybody in Hong Kong. Some fundamental principles that are really important to us in what we're trying to do. A sustainable project. We want it to be an exemplar project for Hong Kong. We don't believe that you can commit the amounts of money that are being spent on this project and the ambition in this project without making it an exemplar sustainable project in every way. And clearly you now get that reflected in much of the work of the architects that are involved or will be involved over the time. And also looking at the economic model, the financial model on which the whole place works. And looking at things like district cooling systems and the whole range of initiatives that will do something about addressing some of the inadequacies I think that we're all too conscious of in terms of the environment of Hong Kong. Many fabulous things happen here. It's a great city to live in, but you've got to say there are a few limitations on some of the environmental sides of what we're doing. On the accessibility front, not a great town for someone who works with a walking stick. And clearly, one of the issues addressed by the new government in terms of, trying to make it a little more accessible. Clearly, having a 40-hectare site that doesn't have cars on it is a particular challenge, but we are absolutely committed to making the site accessible in every way. We're looking at a whole range of ways of being able to move people through the site, move people around the site, allow people in wheelchairs or old people or young people to be able to get to it, and the issues that I mentioned earlier around connectivity. In terms of where we are, I know it's been around a long time. You must be all getting bored waiting for something to happen. But 2011, the adoption of the Foster Masterplan. I came on board 17 months ago now. My two predecessors, one of them had lasted a week, one of them had lasted 5 months. I've now had 4 chairmen in my first 15 months, but I think we're now here for the long haul in terms of trying to realise the project. This year, we've started to move forward in more fundamental ways. We have just received Town Planning Board approval for the development plan, and that will be gazetted hopefully in a few weeks' time, which will allow me to get my shovel and start digging. We've also announced a major program of activities on the site that some of which you may be aware of. We did the Bamboo Theatre project on the Canton Road site last Chinese New Year. We'll be repeating that this coming Chinese New Year. We've done a whole range of activities around the site and in the local communities to try and start to build the sense of enthusiasm. We're about to start the work on the tree nursery, of which there'll be some 5,000 trees. You can all name one after every person who went to UTS from Hong Kong. That's a great sponsorship opportunity. I don't want to take away from your support for the alumni, but I think it will be a great opportunity, and your children will be able to come back in 100 years' time and view that. And then we start digging the park. In terms of dates, 2014-15 focused on a couple of arts pavilions and the development of the park. 2015 to 17, Zishu, the Cantonese Opera Theatre, which we will announce the winner of the first architectural competition early in December. That's the front door to the site. We've had an international competition, and that will be announced, and we will then start work on that building late in 2013. The free space within the park, the Centre for Contemporary Performance, and the first phase of M+, the museum, which is a museum predicated on contemporary art of the region, contemporary art from Hong Kong, art, design, architecture, film, multimedia, and contemporary culture. So it will really address a major failing within the arts ecosystem of Hong Kong. And then 2017 to 2020, really a focus on the bigger performing venues across the site. And then in phase 2, the second phase of M+, and some question marks about other spaces. Does Hong Kong want an opera house in addition to the Zishu Theatre that we build as the first space? There'll be questions that we will be addressing over the coming years. When you're starting from scratch like this, the issue of building content becomes really important, and clearly one of the most important developments in terms of what we're doing was the receipt in June this year of the Uli Sig collection of contemporary Chinese work. For those that are in Hong Kong and read the papers, you'd think that was a bad story. It's actually an extraordinary gift that's been given to Hong Kong of 1,500 works of the major contemporary Chinese artists between 1979 and the present day. And we also acquired 47 specific works that we paid for, and it will provide the cornerstone of the contemporary Chinese collection in the M+ Museum. And it's certainly been a real game changer in terms of what we're doing. Fantastic works that you will recognise that have come into the work, including the other rather controversial project that we're involved with at the moment, at the bottom right-hand side, the Hong Kong artist Lee Kit, who will represent Hong Kong at the Venice Biennale next year, and we will be the curators of that exhibition. And we see that as a major step forward in terms of balancing out the idea of Hong Kong artists and artists from China and the broader region. We're looking at a whole range of activities in building audiences. Clearly, one of the undeveloped areas in Hong Kong is the issue of arts audiences. Many of the companies only perform for limited periods of time. Clearly trying to build the audience for not just the forms like Cantonese opera and those more traditional forms, but looking at how we build the audience for contemporary art. A very bustling, vibrant and economically productive scene around the Hong Kong Art Fair, the new galleries that have arrived in town over the last 5 years. So we're looking at activities to build on that. We're also looking at how you create leaders to take responsibility for taking over for an old man like me at some point and allowing me to go back and retire. Building leaders for the arts organisations, building leaders for West Kowloon, really trying to develop the notion of cultural leadership as distinct from its other forms. And so we're doing activities on that front. We're clearly looking at relationships that we can develop with universities, with the learning sector. And then, more importantly, for those who live here, we'll be doing a whole lot of things, some of which I've mentioned, that early next year, a big public event on the site called Inflation. For those in the banking or related areas, do not be scared. It's not going to come. It's only blow up major pieces of artwork. Mobile M+, which will be sort of continuing to activate the areas around us. The Bamboo Theatre Project, which we'll be building on the Canton Road side again for Chinese New Year. Some of the things I mentioned, Clock and Flap and Free Space, which happens in a couple of weeks. Events like the Wine and Dine Festival, which has just finished. Clearly looking at building momentum for the project, building enthusiasm for the project, and then hoping to inspire both the philanthropic side of Hong Kong, the arts organisations in Hong Kong, and the audiences of Hong Kong in terms of what we're doing. The intention is really, it's focused on Hong Kong. It's looking at Hong Kong arts organisations, Hong Kong artists, and the Hong Kong community. But we don't want it to be an exclusive place. We want it to be predicated on engaging the community of Hong Kong, getting understood the democratisation of arts and culture for all of the people, whether you know about it, whether you've been educated in it, whether you like it, you should at least have the opportunity to be able to experience it. And then clearly we will have venues operating all through the year, being able to attract the very best international talents to sit alongside what's happening in the place. And I guess to finish, it's a place for everyone, and that's really what we're trying to sell as both the justification for such significant investments of money, the fact that there isn't a place like this in Hong Kong. There's not many places like it in the world, and those other ones in the world have tended to take some 50 or 100 years to develop. And as much as I love Sydney, having been born and bred there and lived most of my life there, we're going to give Sydney a run for its money in terms of what we're doing. So thank you very much.
We might just restructure a little bit with our chairs. So while we're moving furniture, I'm just going to introduce our panellists to you. But before we do, I think let's just express our thanks again to Michael. It was a really exciting talk. Thank you, Michael. And now I'd like to introduce our panellists. Patrick Woods, on my right, is Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Vice President, thank you, Resources at UTS. He's accountable for financial services, commercial services, and facilities management, but most importantly, from tonight's perspective, he's responsible for the whole of the university's Campus Masterplan project, including our business school building, which has been designed by Frank Geary. So there's a lot of really exciting parallels happening at UTS, and when the Vice-Chancellor and Michael and others met in July earlier this year, there was a real kind of connection across a whole range of things. And on my immediate right is Hael Kobayashi, and Hael is the Executive Director of Creative Intelligence. So we're certainly right on the money, Michael, in terms of creative leadership at UTS. He's also Associate Director of the Creative Industries Innovation Centre, which is a national centre housed at UTS. He's an international and award-winning executive with over 30 years' experience in the creative industries, including film, digital and new media, broadcast, and the visual and performing arts. So please join me in welcoming Hael and Patrick, and Michael, if you care to join the panel. So we thought this was particularly a great opportunity, and in a sense what we've got from UTS is what Michael, I know, refers to the hardware and the software. So Patrick is really responsible for the built environment at UTS and the extraordinary developments that are happening across a wide range of buildings and facilities and outdoor spaces and places. And certainly what our Vice-Chancellor refers to as a sticky campus, and we might kind of talk about stickiness in terms of your project, Michael, as well as ours, and Hael in terms of software, how it is that we're addressing some of the creative challenges and the positioning of UTS. So we might lead off with just a brief statement perhaps from you, Hael, and then Patrick, and then we might open up for... I think we'll go for Patrick. We'll go for Patrick, yeah. Okay, we're going for Patrick.
Now I'm told I have a really hard time doing what I'm told, so I've been told to turn this microphone off when I'm not talking, so if I do that, please excuse me. What we've seen here from Michael has been an incredible vision, and when you think about it, trying to bring a culture and a people into an area for the people is something that is not just unique to the project that is taking place here, but is also the same for the university and in UTS in Sydney, but also for the city that surrounds the university. Now, a lot of you may not know about what is happening at the university at the moment. On your chairs, there's a small document and a big document, not for you to read at the moment, but at your leisure. You can take a look at it. It is a little bit of a description of what's happening with the master plan, as it were, for UTS. By way of comparison, we're not quite the size that Michael's project is. We're about 40% of, no, we're about 40% of it, though. So, with a university of 35,000 students, we're in a situation where we have for years not been able to keep students on campus. There was a reason for that. The university started off as a place where you'd go to work during the day, and then you'd come to university at night for a few hours and leave as fast as you could. There was no reason to be sticky. That's changed. We're now a university which is far more traditional from an hours perspective, and we do want people to stay. We run virtually 24/7, and we're trying to change the university. Not just to be sticky, but also to better reflect what's inside the university. In Australia, there are 38 universities, not many. And of those 38 universities, until the government stopped measuring the quality of the universities in Australia 2 years ago, we were ranked either first, second, or third on an ongoing basis. That never looked that way when you looked at the campus. Particularly if you've seen the tower, it's not exactly, it was actually voted the ugliest building in Sydney. Yes, we were very proud of that. Yeah. So we've decided to change the look to reflect the quality that actually does exist within it. Now, we're in a situation where we've got 440,000 square meters of space on the university, most of which has to be rebuilt, refurbed, or built new. Like the project that Michael is talking about, we have multiple stakeholders. We're in a situation where we've got the federal government, the state government, the city, the academic community, they're probably the hardest to deal with, the research community, the community itself around us, our neighbors, the ABC and various arts, and it's a task and a half to try and bring all that together, just as it would be in your project. And while all this is taking place, we still have to have a university that runs. That is a challenge. So when you've got jackhammers and rock saws and everything else, and trying not to interfere with the student community that desperately wants to learn, we have a challenge. Now, we're not as fortunate, and we don't have billions of dollars coming from the government. Our project is approximately $8.8 billion Hong Kong, and that's coming from the university, of which probably about 1.2 billion came from the government. Not a lot, not even that much actually. So we've got a little bit more work to do to try and keep our funds moving, but we're well and truly on track for that. Again, similar to your project, we're in a position where multiple projects are running at the same time. Right now, as we speak, we have 4 buildings going up. The total value of those buildings is probably in the neighborhood of $3 billion, Hong Kong, and those will be finished in 2013 and 14. Those are for the Faculty of IT, the Faculty of Science, and indeed, as Jane pointed out, the Frank Gehry designed new Graduate School of Business. And if you've had the opportunity to look at it, it's an interesting building. I do use that term with interest. My brother says it kind of looks like the Chernobyl effect. Other people say it looks like a crumpled paper bag. But what counts is what is inside, and as long as it gets a comment, we're happy. It's also a challenge in a university at this stage in the state of higher education to figure out how to build a campus when the way we teach is changing. So right now, many of you may be aware that Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and others are putting many of their courses online. You can go online and learn anything you want for free. You can't get an accreditation out of it yet, but eventually something will happen. Where that pendulum ends up settling, we're trying to figure out. In the meantime, there's $8 billion on the table at risk. How does it work in the end? So we've got a little bit of sleepless nights ahead of us. As with the project in Hong Kong, much of what we're doing is focused on activation. There's nothing worse than coming to a campus that is cold, austere, nothing to do, nobody to see. So a lot of our effort is going into making sure that the students that come there for the social activities, for the learning activities, which largely take place in group environments these days, as well as having areas that they simply enjoy being in, whether that be from an entertainment perspective or a cultural learning perspective or otherwise. All of this, from our project, has taken more than anything else a huge amount of communication. So just one example of that is that little document that I referred to earlier. That comes out on a monthly basis to keep everybody informed as to what's going on. But as I said earlier, one of the focuses or foci that we have is not just the university, but how it fits into the city and the immediate surrounds to the university. We're fortunate in that approximately, and I'm going to use this term lightly, Hael, about 80% of the creative industries that exist within our state exist within approximately a kilometer of the university. Many of the museums, the ABC, other higher education institutions exist in the neighborhood. So we are in the process of creating a cultural and educational and creative precinct. And trying to do that is, again, taking more brain power than we ever thought we'd need and stepping outside the university and into its surrounds. And I'm going to stop there because Hael's far more experienced at the creative industries than I could ever hope to be, and I'm going to hand over to him and talk about different aspects of this. I'll turn it off.
All right, we'll see if this is working. It is. Hello. Thank you, Patrick. Good evening. Well, as Patrick mentioned, UTS has made a significant investment in taking this wonderful opportunity that they have to not only create a newer physical environment, but to also consider how we're looking at learning, how we're looking, at teaching and learning in the 21st century. And it's true that, thank you, Jane. It's true that what we're seeing, of course, are the many advances in terms of education delivery and the advent of MOOCs and online courses, and what does that mean and how do people learn. We also know that within that kind of blended learning environment that people are still seeking to come together face to face and have that kind of experience. And that might have to do with several factors. Certainly it has to do with the fact that during these times of great unrest across the world, as we're going through these large waves of transformation, there's a real need to look at the humanity of what's going on, and that need to look at human-centered innovation and make sure that we keep that element alive, especially in a university. So we had an opportunity here as part of what's happening at UTS to consider the need for the creative industries in the 21st century. And there was a bid process that was put out for a major city in Australia to host the Creative Industries Innovation Center. And it ended up being hosted at UTS. And that was partially because they brought together a consortia of the key stakeholders, some of whom Patrick has mentioned, like the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the Powerhouse Museum, some of the other education providers and other cultural entities, to say, we're really concerned about the creative industries and we know that they are part of our future. And that enabled the city to come together with the university and to land the bid to host the Creative Industries Innovation Center at the university. Now, that center is externally facing, and their primary remit is to work with emerging creative industries and make sure that they're strong. Currently, creative industries in Australia contribute more to GDP than agriculture or other resources services such as gas and electricity. So it's a very interesting statistic to look at in terms of how people participate in developing the economy. And in Australia, as you see elsewhere, and also in Hong Kong, there's a real depth to the creative industries, and people embrace them widely. So off the back of hosting the Creative Industries Innovation Center, also known affectionately as the CIIC, there was an opportunity to do a pan-university creative industries strategy without necessarily creating a new faculty right off the bat. The idea was this, that creative industries are, as we've also seen in Michael's presentation, very multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. And the reason why we engage so deeply with them is because they allow us to look at the world in different ways, to imagine better futures, to look at better solutions for what's going on. And in looking across UTS, we found that high degree of fantastic problem solving actually existed in all of the faculties. It was expressed in different ways, and it altogether was very multidimensional. And while the university was wondering up to a certain point why it had taken so long to have a creative industry strategy, it was actually a great advantage to not have had one prior to now, when we could say we could take the strengths of engineering, we could take the strengths of the faculty of arts and social sciences and their deep studies in the humanities to look at the strengths, especially in our design, architecture, and building faculty, to look at our business school, law, science, and health as well. And together to say that all of this is what the new form of creative industries is, driven by that need for human-centered innovation, design-led innovation. So we're in the early stages of this strategy, and in order to make it work, though, we can't keep it insular. We can't operate solely inside the university. We're having to partner outside. And so we're working with some of the cultural institutions in Sydney to develop pilot programs for the university. We're also working with several of the incubators in Sydney who are filled with the young entrepreneurs who are creating new business models. And we're doing internship programs with them to learn what are these emerging environments for people? What are those jobs of the future that we can't quite describe? And how can creative industries both inform and help develop that? We just ran a great program down the street in UTS. It was Startup Weekend. It was funded by Optus. It was held at one of the incubators called Fish Burners. And their motto for the weekend was, "Your dream job does not exist. You must create it." And we're finding more and more that talking about creative industries allows people to have a dialogue about creating a better world. When people talk about creativity, it's something that many people can understand. When we describe it in other ways, it sometimes alienates some, or they feel that it's too specialized and it's something that they can't quite connect with. So I've mentioned all of this as a way of saying that the university itself is really looking at what is happening at education in the 21st century. How are we thinking? How are we looking for those solutions? How much the creative industries are contributing to this. And therefore, out of all of this, we created this new strategy at UTS called the Creative Intelligence Strategy. We're using our pilot programs to test this thinking and to work with all of our faculty and our staff and our external partners. And in the core of this, we're finding that there are quite a few people who want to participate. And we're beginning, one of our new platforms is going to be around design thinking and design thinking research. And so we hope to be partnering with universities. We're very keen about what's going on in Hong Kong and looking at possibilities here where we can create more of that global learning environment for the university.
Thank you, Hael. That was most interesting. I think we might throw straight out to some questions and answers. I've got a few that I'd like to pursue, but perhaps we can invite members of the audience to ask any questions you'd like, really, of any any member of the panel or all of the panel? Yes. I'm going to pass the microphone around. I think that's easiest.
Okay. So I've got a question for Michael, which is, I guess it goes like this. Hong Kong tends to be absolutely brilliant at the opposite ends of a spectrum. At the one end, you've got the hard infrastructure, the airport, the PADS project. And at the other end, you've got the completely informal, totally government-free, non-coordinated, what goes on at the street level. And at those two ends of the spectrum, Hong Kong is like absolutely world-class. But in between those, it tends to be pretty awful at it. I mean, the whole thing about let's do innovation in Hong Kong, $4 billion put into the ITF, it's been a total failure. I mean, there's nothing come out of it, nothing at all. 750 million put into a venture capital fund, 350 million lost. Whoops, we better stop that. And in a sense, West Kowloon sort of is in that middle space, isn't it? Because it's kind of it's sort of government coordinated, possibly throttled. I mean, you see where I'm coming from. I mean, how can you? This is a very, very difficult area to work in here.
I think that's right, except that I'd say from the perspective, is that working? Yeah. Can you hear? Yeah. I have every confidence that because part of what we're doing is building facilities that are sorely needed to support arts organisations, cultural organisations, arts education and a whole range of other things. I have not a lot of worries that the complex engineering and the complex building task will be accomplished in line with what you said. I think the interesting issue for us is that we are going to be a catalyst for change in the way you run cultural organisations, the way you challenge, the way that government runs some of the organisations in the city. Clearly the way you run cultural venues in Hong Kong is probably 25 years out of date in terms of comparison with many other places. So, that sort of, how you use technology in a place like ours is going to be an immense challenge, but we've done, the hard research so that we're not going to throw money up against a wall to do that. We're looking at developing the strategy over the course of the coming years. Sorry, I'm very low. So, on that point of view, developing the capacity of the artists and the arts organisations in Hong Kong is going to be an important part. And in particular, I think there's a challenge in the parents of Hong Kong being able to accept that artistic, cultural, innovative, creative life is a legitimate area to allow their children to explore. And to me, that's where it starts to get interesting, where you can engage in debate, you can start challenging the notion of, if you want happy children, perhaps open up the idea that not every one of them wants to be a doctor, a banker, or a lawyer, with no disrespect to our hosts tonight. But there are many now wonderful career opportunities. I happen to have 3 kids, all, somewhat to my chagrin, work within the arts and the creative industries. And, one of them makes money, one of them spends money, and one of them is a continual drain on everyone around him. But to me, they have pursued careers in an area that they like, and I do feel there's an overwhelming pressure on young people in Hong Kong to you're forced to learn piano, you're forced to learn a whole lot of things, and by the time you actually have some degree of competence in it, all you want to do is get away from it. And so we're engaged, I think, in some quite transforming discussions around what our place is going to be. We need to make it, young people want to get outside. They don't want to, they want to be with other people. But clearly there is some huge pressure in Hong Kong to keep you locked up. And so challenging that notion by all of our initial activities over the next couple of years are largely outdoor activities, I hope starts to address, what's happening in the in-between space can become a much more effective way of developing both what we're trying to do on the building and the other fronts, but to really sort of change the notion that just throwing money at the project is necessarily going to do it. I want to change philanthropy in Hong Kong so that it is not just, with due respect to my colleagues, it shouldn't just be going to hospitals and tertiary or school institutions. I believe legitimately some of that money should be flowing in other areas, both sort of across the spectrum. So it's that sort of engagement that I see as important as the building stuff. I'm very convinced that the building, the interest from the outside world and the Hong Kong world in how you design the buildings, how they're going to work, who's going to do them, is important. But that it's all the other stuff that is going to be as important in determining it. Without the tradition of sort of supporting organisations, you have well endowed arts organisations, but many of them only work 50 performances a year. Well, that's absurd if you look at how they compare with, you've got 7.5 million people, you've got 4 million people in Sydney. They're really quite interesting contrasts in terms of the level of activity that happens there all of the time. And I guess that's the sort of change we would like to see over the next couple of years.
Thank you. Next question. Oh, come on. I was actually going to ask you a question about philanthropy, but what about corporate sponsorship, Michael? Is that a part of the mix as well?
Well, it'll certainly be our intention. I'll be coming back down to Mallison's King Wood to discuss with them opportunities. But it's relatively undeveloped in terms of, there is corporate support within Hong Kong in areas, but I think the idea of getting behind big projects and sticking with those projects is going to be one of the challenges that we'll be looking at trying to shift, not just for us. We are incredibly well supported by the government, but what I do believe is that it's unreasonable to expect government to be doing everything. And I think, in a way, going back to your question, part of the problem has been, this place, government has had a lot of money to throw at a lot of potential areas that they think they can influence, and not all of it's worked. And so I guess a better balance between a city that is very privileged to have high net levels of wealth, to be able to get some of that to be used in the interest of the whole of Hong Kong seems to be one of our other big challenges.
Sustainability. This is something that keeps us up at night a lot at UTS, and Patrick, you might want to talk just a little bit about our approach to the sustainable aspects of our project, and Michael, perhaps how we could help you with some of those.
I can try that. Am I working? Yes, I am. I can hear myself. Sustainability is something that has been a bit of a brain tease for us for some years now, in the sense that we made a commitment, and I'm going to have to get that moved, those mics moved, I think, because they're doing reverb. Thanks. We made a commitment to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as an organization by 30% from our 2007 levels by 2020. Now, 30% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're almost doubling your campus size, you can basically double your effort to say that it's closer to 60% emissions reductions. It's something that we've struggled with, but we believe we've got a solution, and that is a combination of changing the way we do lighting. It's moving to tri-generation. I'm not sure what your power source is, but we're going to move to tri-gen. It's a combination of using those things as well as changing people's behavior about how they operate on campus, and indeed giving them the tools to be able to change those behaviors. I think I've got one of the only offices that I can actually walk out the door and switch the light off. Yeah, everything else, who knows when the lights are going to go off. The campus and the environment needs to be better managed, and I'll say computerized. So the campus that we're dealing with now is trying to change it to a smart campus, whereby at any point in time I want to be able to look at a computer somewhere and say, there's a classroom there that's got 7 students in it, it's been designed for 50, we have to change our timetabling somehow. I want to be able to say, instead of 50 students, it's got 7, therefore turn the air conditioning so it's not as cold as it otherwise would be, save energy.
I can try.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
I don't know. Can you turn that, maybe just turn it off, yeah. Oh, cool. I'm just one of those reverberating kind of guys. So it really does come down to getting a smart campus that should be able to manage itself more effectively through technology and reduce a lot of our emissions. So hand this to you and see if you reverberate.
Well, I guess that's all incredibly interesting stuff to us, because Hong Kong has got a lot of ground to make up on the sustainability front, and what I said when I talked earlier was what we're trying to do is to find best practice and apply it. But if you look at where the site is, there are limitations to what impact we can have. We're looking at district cooling systems, and power is a more complex issue in Hong Kong. On that basis, what we're trying to do is to use the best practice that is happening in various parts of the world, and I must say a lot of it happening in China. And I think sort of part of some of the good stories that are happening in China have been lost somewhat in the climate change and the zero carbon debates, and trying to use all the lessons that other places have been able to use successfully to put that into this project. I can't see the point of doing this project if you are not modelling the very best behaviours in terms of what's happening, and hopefully there is a quite significant commitment now by the Hong Kong government to want to change practices. The whole idea of removing vehicles, of moving to electric vehicles in a place like this is clearly something that can have significant impacts on what's going on. This is still a very big diesel town, and we know the state of the air, and so there are plenty of things that we can learn on that front.
One of the questions I've got for Michael before Jane says thank you. One of the things that I noticed, I flew in, was it last night we flew in? It was raining, it was misty. I got to the 29th floor of my hotel, and I looked out the window, and it looked like a scene from Blade Runner. It was all these high rises and lights on everywhere. And aside from thinking about a movie, the other thing that struck me was the amount of concrete that exists in the city. And when we're doing construction here, is there actually concrete recycling? I mean, at UTS, about 85 to 90% of everything that we throw out is recycled.
I think my site's made out of recycled concrete, isn't it? I think you'll find. One of the things, the only reason I know anything about it, and I don't pretend to be an expert, is that around where I live, they're pulling down a number of buildings, and the way that they do it is to mince the whole building up into little pieces and then recycle it. And clearly on that, building destruction or demolition in Hong Kong is done more brilliantly than in any place in the world when you consider the challenges that are there.
Oh, thank you. I'll hand this over to Jane before I get off my soapbox here.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to quickly call on Ed to come and give the vote of thanks, and then we can continue the conversation informally over some more drinks. So, Edmund. The mic is live.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're very proud to be the sponsor of the first international alumni event of the University of Technology, Sydney. Obviously, as King & Wood Mallesons, we're an organization with a very strong Australian heritage. We are home to many UTS alumni, and we support regular gathering of these events. We're very honored today to have the CEO of the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority, Mr Lynch, to present on the West Kowloon District Cultural District project. I was actually involved in one of the earlier versions for a developer who shall remain nameless several years ago. Unfortunately, that didn't go ahead. Hong Kong has never been known for its arts and cultural industries. I hope with the under the leadership of Michael, with the completion of the West Kowloon Cultural District, it will really put Hong Kong on the map as an international arts and cultural center. Thanks also to the UTS Deputy Vice-Chancellor Resources, Mr. Patrick Wood, and the Executive Director of UTS Creative Intelligence Unit, Hael Kobayashi, for participating in the discussions and addressing challenges of project management and creativity at UTS from the perspective of the Campus Masterplan project. Last but not least, we're very honored to have as a guest here tonight Mr. Paul T. of the Australian Consul General in Hong Kong. So thank you very much for coming, and enjoy the drinks.
Thank you.